Yeah, right.
I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. He speaks so.
But he's going to use a microphone
Yes.
and a speaker system.
Yes.
Arnold, did you turn it off?
No, it's on.
It's on.
Okay. Just thinking we might need a battery.
But the battery?
But it's okay.
Okay.
If you drown out, I'll grab you a new one.
We'll know immediately when the battery dies.
Kind of like my pacemaker.
Oh, great.
Oh, good.
Is there a doctor in the house?
We're not gonna bring you back, we're
Is there
just
a
gonna
doctor
let you
in the
go.
house?
I just said that.
Oh. I didn't hear you.
It's okay.
Okay, we're going to now move to the timing of the rapture event. Let's begin with the Gospel of Luke chapter 21. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there's no mention of the church in any tribulation passage, and that's true in the New Testament especially, because the church was a mystery until the New Testament. Now, chapter 21, he's been dealing with some of the details of the tribulation, but then skip down to verse 34. That's okay.
She was in the closet.
Verse 34, but take heed to yourselves, lest haply your hearts may be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of this life, and that they come on you suddenly as a snare. For so shall it come upon all them that dwell on all the face of the earth. Notice all used twice. For so shall it come upon all them that dwell on the face of all the earth. So no matter where you live on the earth, you'll be affected. But then verse 36, but watch ye at every season, making supplication that she may prevail to escape all these things that shall come to pass and to stand before the Son of Man. So notice there's a way of escaping, but not on the earth. The tribulation will be fall upon all the face of the earth. There's no escaping it on the earth. To some degree, everybody will be affected. But there is a way of escaping, and the way of escaping, notice, is to stand before the Son of Man. To escape all these things, and to stand before the Son of Man. Is a clear statement, it's a way of escaping, but not on the earth. Is to stand before the Son of Man, and standing before the Son of Man is to stand in a form of evaluation or judgment or so on. And now let's go to the book of 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, 1 Thess chapter 1.
Arnold, are you talking about the timing of the rapture?
What did I say?
You said tribulation, I think.
To escape the tribulation. You can't escape it if you're on the earth. The way of escaping is to be off the earth and to stand before the Son of Man. You in Luke chapter 21?
Yeah. It's under the timing of the rapture.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's a rapture. To escape, you cannot escape the tribulation if you're on the earth. Then it goes on to say it's a way of escaping, which is to stand before the Son of Man. Now, 1 Thess chapter 1, look at verse 9. For they themselves report concerning us what manner of entering we had unto you, and how you turned unto God from idols to serve a living and true God, and to wait for a Son from heaven, whom you raised from the dead, even Yeshua, who delivers us from the wrath to come. We talk about the wrath of God, there's two senses to it. First of all, there is the present wrath of God against sin, as in the book of Romans chapter 1, for example. But there's also the future wrath of God, the wrath of the tribulation. And this is being speaking of the future wrath. This is a special coming of the Messiah for the purpose of delivering us who believe from the wrath to come. This fits well with what we saw in chapter 14 of John, verses 1 and 2. There's a special coming of the Messiah to take us to where he was then going, who's then going to heaven. A special coming to take us to heaven. But in this passage adds, he's also coming for the purpose of delivering us from the future wrath. And that is the wrath to come. Let's go over to chapter 5. We already looked at chapter 4, verses 13 through 18 in the first session, where he details with the rapture event. Let's get to chapter 5, verse 1. He begins with the phrase, but concerning. But concerning. Now the actual two Greek words are peri, P-E-R-I, and the E, that should be on the screen by now. Chapter 5 at the very top there, but peri there. And when in the Greek system, whenever you introduce a new topic, you begin the new topic with these two words, peri there, but concerning. A very good example of this is in the epistle of 1 Corinthians. And he goes from one subject to another, to another, to another. Every time you change the subject, you'll see those two words in English, but concerning. But in Greek, it's the word peri there. Which also means that he's finished with the previous contact. He's starting a new topic altogether. And the new topic is whatever he says in 1 Corinthians, but concerning, but this, but that, and so on. So in this first Thessalonian epistle, in chapter 4, verses 13 through 18, he's been describing the rapture event. But now in chapter 5, verse 1, he begins with the phrase peri there, meaning but concerning. He's now introducing a brand new topic. He's not continuing a discussion on the rapture, he's continuing with a brand new topic. Now what is that new topic? But concerning the times and the seasons, brethren, you have no need that aught be written unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so comes as a thief in the night. And the phrase, the day of the Lord, is the most common biblical term we now call the tribulation. Now the most common term today, tribulation, great tribulation, but the most common term in both testaments is the day of Yahweh, the day of Jehovah, the day of the Lord. So dealing with the day of the Lord in chapter 5, verses 1 through 3, he emphasizes that he's going to be discussing in the day of the Lord. He doesn't need to give them any details, because they already know the details from his previous visit to them in Thessalonica. He said, there's nothing more that I need to write in verse 1. Why? For you already know that the day of the Lord will come as the thief in the night. It'll become totally unexpectedly. So people are saying peace and safety, it suddenly hits, but it's going to hit the unbelievers. So verse 3, and when they're saying peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall in no wise escape. And there's a contrast between the ones he's talking to and those who he's not talking to. He's talking about the believers. And I don't have to write to you any more than I already have, he says. You already know all this. And so people are saying we've reached a time of peace and safety, and suddenly the day of the Lord, suddenly the day of the tribulation hits. And in verses 4 to 8 goes on to point out that they will not overtake the believer as the thief, only the unbeliever. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that the day should overtake you as the thief. For ye are all sons of light and sons of the day. We are not of the night, nor of the darkness. So then let us not sleep, nor as do the rest, but let us watch and be sober. For they that sleep, sleep in the night, and they that are drunken in the night. But let us, since we are of the day, be sober, putting on the breastplate of faith and love, and for a helmet the hope of salvation. So in verses 4 to 8, he keeps emphasizing that they that will overtake the unbeliever, like a thief in the night, you will not overtake them. And the contrast is that he borrows from a key passage in the book of Zephaniah, chapter 1, verses 14 through 20. Zephaniah 1, 14 through 20. The day of the Lord is a time of darkness and blackness and night. A point also made in Acts chapter 2, verses 1 through 11. Acts 2, verses 1 through 11. When the day of the Lord hits, notice it comes upon the sons of darkness and the sons of the night. But believers are of the day, and of the light shall not come upon them. And then he reaches his high point in verse 9. For God appointed us not unto wrath. What wrath in this context? The wrath of the day of the Lord. We've not been appointed to follow in that period of time. And he's referring to church saints. For God appointed unto wrath, but unto the obtaining of salvation to the Lord Yeshua the Messiah. Thus should not have been appointed to suffer the blackness and darkness of the night, were of the day. So believers are not appointed unto wrath, the wrath of the day of the Lord. Believers are not appointed to wrath. And wrath goes back to verse 2, the wrath of the day of the Lord. So how are we to escape that time? He's already told us that in chapter 4, verses 13 through 18. And now let's go to chapter 3 of Revelation, chapter 3. And look at verse 10. Revelation chapter 3, verse 10, writing to the church. He writes in verse 10, because you did keep the word of my patience, I will also keep you from the hour of trial, that hour which is to come upon the whole world, to try them that dwell upon the earth. And this is the specific promise that the church would not go in to that period of trial. And that's why that as soon as it gets into the tribulation, which will be beginning actually in chapter 6 all the way to chapter 18, the church is not mentioned a single time. He doesn't say, notice also he doesn't say God will keep the church safe in the hour of trial, as a lot of mid-tribs and post-tribs teach. He keeps us from the very hour of it, from the very timing of it. We're not going to be here. Let's go over to chapter 19. In chapter 19, Verses 1 through 8, he describes events in heaven just before the second coming. The second coming begins to be described in verse 11. From the first 8 verses, he describes 4 things that will take place in heaven before the actual second coming. One of which is the marriage of the Lamb. Look at verse 6, chapter 19, verse 6. And I heard, as it were, the voice of a great multitude, the voice of many waters, the voice of mighty thunder, saying, Hallelujah! For the Lord our God, the Almighty, reigns. Let us rejoice and be exceeding glad. Let us give the glory unto him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife had made herself ready. It was given unto her that she should array herself in fine linen, bright and pure, for the fine linen is the righteous acts of the saints. One of the events that will happen in heaven before the second coming is the marriage ceremony of the Lamb. And this shows, for example, that the church is already in heaven before the second coming. The second coming begins in verse 11. She's already in heaven before the second coming. Furthermore, she didn't just arrive. Because notice her concerning her garments, he points out she is dressed in fine linen. One of the many symbols in the book of Revelation, we tells you right away what the fine linen represents. There's no need to guess. The fine linen is what? The righteous acts of the saints. Which means that at this point of time, not only is the bride, the church, already in heaven before the second coming, she's been there long enough to undergo something we're about to study, the judgment seat of the Messiah. And what that means is that all the wood, hay, stubble, as we'll see momentarily, has been burnt away. All that's left is the gold, silver, precious stone. So all that is showing on her wedding time, is the righteous acts of the saints. So again, not only is she in heaven already before the second coming, she's been there long enough to undergo, each individual member of the body undergo the judgment seat. There's more I want to say, but tomorrow our study is on the wife of Jehovah and the bride of Messiah, so we'll talk more about this tomorrow. But let's not deal with some other facets. Let's go to Romans 3 and your outline, the judgment seat of Messiah. And let's turn to Romans chapter 14. Romans chapter 14. Romans 14 verse 10. Romans 14 verse 10. But you, why do you judge your brother? Or you again, why do you serve not your brother? We shall all stand before the judgment seat of God, as it is written, As I live, says the Lord, to me every knee shall bow, and every tongue shall confess to God. So he points out there's got a basic fact, and here just a general statement. Every one of us, members of the body of the Messiah, will have to give an account how we served the Lord since we believed. Whatever we believed or didn't believe before salvation is irrelevant. But once we have become believed, how we have lived our life as believers will be relevant. Not in the sense of ever losing salvation, but in the sense of who will be rewarded and who will not be rewarded. Let's go to the second passage in 2 Corinthians chapter 5. 2 Corinthians chapter 5. Now look at verse 10. 2 Corinthians chapter 5 verse 10. For you must all be made manifest before the judgment seat of Messiah, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he had done, whether it be good or bad. The basis of the judgment, notice, are going to be judged on how we serve the Lord since we believed. And either we shall receive rewards, or we shall not receive rewards, or we shall receive partial things and not partial things, but the basis of the judgment is how we have served Him since we believed. Now the most detailed account comes in 1 Corinthians chapter 3. 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Looking at verse 10. Now verse 10, 11. For according to the grace of God which was given unto me as the wise master builder, I laid a foundation, another build thereon. Let each man take hold of how he builds thereon, for other foundation can no man lay than that which is laid, which is Yeshua the Messiah. So in verses 10, 11, the labor is the labor in the body. And all of us will have to give an account how we served Him. We should keep in mind that we are building on a foundation. The foundation in Ephesians chapters 2 and 3 is the foundation of the apostles, New Testament apostles, New Testament prophets, with the Messiah being the chief cornerstone. And so the apostles make up one line, and the New Testament prophets the other line. Right in between them is the cornerstone, the Messiah. And once you have this much done, then you know how to finish the rest of it. And so the foundation was already laid by the time the last of the apostles died, and that was the Apostle John. And so all of us are simply the stones on building on top of the foundation. Then in verse 12, if any man build on the foundation gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, stubble. And so the issue in verse 12 is the issue is quality. Not so much quantity, though a quantity of one thing will matter, one quantity of the other will not matter. So when we are serving the Lord, fulfilling whatever spiritual gift of gifts God has given us to build up the local body, as one was actively doing these things, we're building with gold, silver, precious stone. And the more gold, silver, precious stone will make a difference, because that's going to determine our position in the Messianic kingdom. On the other hand, on basic times when we have been falling away for time, or choosing not to do many things that we've been gifted to do, the wood, hay, stubble, it is irrelevant how much wood, hay, stubble that is going to be relevant. It won't be relevant at all. Because in verse 13, notice the judgment will come by fire. Each man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it, because it is revealed in fire. And the fire itself shall prove each man's work of what sort it is. So fire applied to wood, hay, stubble, what happens? It all goes down to ashes. So no matter how much we've accumulated, it's all going to be destroyed. And while we're accumulating wood, hay, stubble, we're not accumulating gold, silver, precious stone. And when fire is applied to gold, precious stone, all of the impurities in gold, silver, precious stone are going to be cleansed, burned away. And that's why in the passage we just read in Revelation 19, what is shown is the bride of the fine linen, which he interprets as the righteous acts of the saints. So the fire won't be applied to the believer, will apply to the works of the believer. And wood, hay, stubble that goes to ashes. Gold, silver, precious stone, purified of all impurities. And finally, the result is found in verses 14 and 15. If any man's work shall abide, he shall build thereon, and shall receive a reward. If any man's work shall be burnt, he shall suffer loss, but he himself shall be saved. Yet so is by fire. Notice no loss of salvation. Once a person is saved, the salvation is there. And salvation was a free gift, received by grace through faith, apart from any work. And so when the fire is applied to the gold, silver, precious stone of verse 14, it'll purify all impurities. And that's why all that is showing on the bride on her wedding day is going to be the righteous acts of the saints. But if what is available is only wood, hay, stubble, or with some gold, silver, precious stone, some wood, hay, stubble, the wood, hay, stubble is going to be irrelevant. It'll all go down, burnt to ashes, but he verifies it doesn't affect the salvation of one who is saved. Will affect only the person who has not served the Lord as well as he could have. And this answers the problem of carnal saints that people often bring up. How can carnal saints still not lose their salvation? Because the Bible tells us he can't lose his salvation, even here. Even if he's got nothing to show for a spiritual life, it says he's still saved. Now rewards are earned. Salvation are received by grace through faith plus nothing. Now, as far as what we shall receive is mentioned by different types of crowns. And as far as we know from Scripture, there's 5 different kinds of crowns available to those who serve the Lord in some capacity. For the first one, let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. First Corinthians chapter 9, and look at verse 25. And every man that strives in the games exercises self-control in all things, that they that do it to receive a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible crown. An incorruptible crown is for victory in the spiritual life, in the spiritual warfare. We all have to suffer spiritual warfare. None of us will succeed in a perfect state in this life, but the more we deal with the spiritual warfare in the present time, the more consistently we should be winning. Never 100%, but consistently we should be doing better each time. And for those who have gained victory in the spiritual life more consistently by the time the person dies or is raptured, that person received the incorruptible crown. The second crown is 1 Thess chapter 2. 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. Look at verse 19. For what is our hope, or joy, or crown of glorying? Are not even ye before our Lord Jesus at his coming? For ye are our glory and our joy. And this is called the crown of rejoicing, and that is for their soul winning. And those whom it's not going to be based upon how many people we let the Lord. It's going to be based upon how willing we be able to share the gospel with those we come in contact with. And obviously, the more time we witness, the more there'll be souls that will won for the Lord. So those who have been very active in soul winning, they're going to receive the crown of rejoicing. We don't necessarily have to be as winning as, say, people like Billy Graham are. But we are consistent in soul winning and sharing this is the crown available to those who so practice it. For the third crown, let's go to 2 Timothy chapter 4. 2 Timothy chapter 4. And look at verse 7. 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 7. Paul, speaking of himself, says, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. Henceforth there is laid up for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, shall give to me at that day, and not to me only, also to all of them that love his appearing. And the crown of righteousness is for those who look forward and love his appearing. Those who live believing the rapture could come today, because it could come today, and always living in the fact that we may be alive when the rapture actually occurs and things of that nature. Those people who study Bible prophecy and love his appearing will qualify for the crown of righteousness. Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 5. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 4. And when the chief shepherd shall be manifested, ye shall receive the crown of glory that fades not away. Now go back to verse 1, it's specifically dealing to those who are elders in the local church. And those who exercise their eldership in a proper way, and the proper way is described in verses 1 through 4. In verse 4, those who are faithful in eldership will receive the crown of glory. And in describing the nature of righteous elders, just read verses 1 through 3. And those who follow these principles will end up in verse 4 with the crown of glory. There's one more crown mentioned. Let's go to Revelation chapter 2. Revelation chapter 2. Look at verse 16. Revelation chapter 2, verse 16. That's not the verse I'm looking for.
Maybe 10.
And 10 it is. That's my first mistake. This is my last one. My last one was not all that long ago either. Okay, chapter 2, verse 10. Fear not the things which ye are about to suffer. Behold, the devil is about to cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried. Ye shall have tribulation 10 days, but be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. The crown of life is given for believers who suffered martyrdom because of what they believe. If they suffer death for any other reason, that's a different issue. But suffering death because of what we believe, but those who undergo martyrdom, and over the centuries, many have, will receive the crown of life for being martyred. Fortunately, there's a possibility of getting this crown not going quite to that same end. So turn to James chapter 1. James chapter 1 and look at verse 12. James 1 and look at verse 12. And verse 12 says, "Blessed is the man that endures temptation, for when he had been approved, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord promised to them that love him." And those who have actually faced a lot of suffering because of the faith will still qualify for the crown of life, even if they're not martyred. So two categories of qualifications for the crown of life: either having suffered because of what we believe, and in the USA we haven't suffered all that much. But in other countries there's a lot of suffering for those who have made this faith, especially believers in Muslim countries. Usually suffer a great deal. And for those who actually go the full length and are martyred for the faith, are guaranteed the crown of life. There may be other types of crowns and so on, but as far as what the Bible shows, these are the only 5 crowns actually mentioned. The outline shows also the marriage of the Lamb, but because our final topic tomorrow will be on the issue of Israel as the wife of Yahweh, Jehovah, and the church as the bride of Messiah, I don't want to go into all this. We'll get into all this more in detail in our study for tomorrow afternoon. So we have lots of time for questions, for anything we've talked about today. So if you have any questions, just don't ask me any questions about the marriage, but you can ask any other questions you would like. And that is available to you. Okay, if you have a question, and of course you always have to be the first one, go ahead.
I can be the last. So you said there were 4 things that happen. I got number 1, marriage.
4 things that happen.
4 things that happen after the bride is in heaven before the second coming. Revelation 19, down at the bottom of page 2, on the outline.
I mentioned 4 specific things.
4 things you said happen. Anybody else get that?
I don't remember 4. Must be something else I said.
They had the stubble and stuff burned away because they
I think it
had time to be judged and change
that was
clothes.
cheated.
Okay.
Okay. Any other authentic questions? That's your husband laughing at me.
Remember that Greek word, Perez?
Okay, any other questions? Okay.
I have a question. On Revelation 19, verse 9, he says, "And the angel said to me, write this, blessed are those who are invited to the marriage supper of the Lamb." So,
That's part of tomorrow's topic.
yeah, it is. Who are the guests, though?
The guests are the believers who are not of the church. In the church of the saints from Acts 2 until the rapture occurs. So Old Testament saints are not members of the church, but they'll be resurrected in the 75-day interval period between the end of tribulation, start of the kingdom, and they'll be the ones among the guests, for example, at this particular wedding. Not wedding, but the wedding feast. You got 4 elements. You have the arrangement, then you have the fetching of the bride, the wedding ceremony, and the wedding feast. And we'll deal with all those 4 points to some degree tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll try again.
So the timing of if they are not aware of the second coming, it's the unbelievers, of course, because we're gone.
It's not the issue is not that they're unaware of the day of the Lord. It's not the same as the second coming.
Okay, what's the day of the Lord?
The tribulation, all 7 years of it.
Okay, but don't we know that the tribulation starts with the signing of the covenant?
We know that, and we're gone by then. But the unbeliever, the contrast he did in that passage, it falls upon the unbeliever like a thief in the night, totally unexpected and so on. It says, but we will not be overtaken by that day because we are of the light and of the day.
I don't know, but I'm telling all my friends who aren't believers, when you see the covenant signed, look out.
So it doesn't matter whether they believe in it or not. If they're believers, they're going to be out. Other people who are mid-trips and post-trips and three-quarter trip, they're going to be in the tribulation. So whether they believe in the pre-trib or not, they're still going to go pre-trib.
No, I mean the unbelievers.
But non-believers, especially the unbelievers, are going to be hit unexpectedly by the day of the Lord, because day of the night. But we who are believed, we're not going to be overtaken. Just like he made a contrast between the unbeliever in 1 S5 and the believers in 1 S5. It will not overtake us. We'll overtake them.
I know, but if we tell them what to look for, how can it take them by surprise?
Who, the unbelievers?
Yeah.
If the unbelievers, they're not going to believe whatever you say anyway.
They won't have an aha moment. Oh, I remember now what she said.
But that's after the event.
That's after the fact.
After the event, it'll have an aha moment, but too, the aha moment won't suddenly let them be raptured.
So sorry. Too late.
Yeah,
Do you think there could be a gap between the rapture and tribulation?
very easily. The rapture does not start the tribulation. Does rapture come just before the tribulation? It could come 10, 20, 30 years before the tribulation. We don't know. So could the rapture come today? The answer is yes. Can the tribulation start tomorrow? The answer is no. The world stage is not yet set for the tribulation to begin.
Thank you.
Okay?
Okay, today, Feast of Trumpets. And that is a picture of the rapture, correct?
Well, the rapture will be the fulfillment of the Feast of Trumpets.
Okay, and with the spring feasts and the fulfillment of Jesus' first coming, they happened on that day of that feast. Is that correct?
That doesn't have to happen on that day, though.
Okay, so it could happen today.
Turn to Hebrews chapter 9 for a moment. You could have a fulfillment of a specific element without it be happening on that day. So if you look at verse 11 of Hebrews 9, are you there?
Yes?
Okay. But Messiah, having come a high priest of good things to come, to the greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, this is say not of this creation, nor yet through the blood of goats and calves, but through his own blood, entered in once for all into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption. And notice that the sacrifices of goats and calves, that's the sacrifices specifically for the Day of Atonement. The calf for the high priest, and then the people in general by the one goat. One goat dies, one goat becomes a scapegoat. So he's showing that the blood of the Messiah fulfilled the Day of Atonement sacrifice. However, he didn't die on the Day of Atonement. He died on Passover. So you have a fulfillment rather falling on that day. So sometimes it happens on the day, but sometimes it doesn't happen the day. And that includes the Yom Kippur sacrifice. He fulfilled the sacrifice, but he didn't die on Yom Kippur. Question?
So the rapture signifies like Rosh Hashanah.
Doesn't signify Rosh Hashanah, it just signifies, the rapture signifies the removal. But the and so it will fulfill the Feast of Trumpets.
Right.
Yeah.
And so Yom Kippur, isn't that fulfilled by the last 3 days of the tribulation when the Jews come to faith?
Well, yes and no. The sacrifice for the Day of Atonement has already been fulfilled when he died. That's in this verse right here. But as far as this was national salvation, that will happen in the last 3 days of the tribulation.
So I mean, the fall festivals follow chronologically.
Chronologically.
You're saying not exactly on the date we celebrate.
Yeah, it'll follow the chronology of the 7 feasts, but doesn't have to happen on a specific feast day. So when the Day of Atonement was satisfied here, the blood of Jesus fulfilled that Day of Atonement, but he did not die on the Day of Atonement. He died at Passover.
He still was fulfilling a feast, though.
But now what?
He still was fulfilling a feast.
Yeah, it feels a piece of it, but that's not the totality.
It just
And
seems.
body didn't die on the Day of Atonement.
I know, but it seems that if there were specific things that happen on specific days in the spring festivals, why wouldn't it follow that way in the fall?
Because the text doesn't demand it. It's not in the text. I just showed you one text. The blood of the Messiah fulfilled the sacrifice of the goat and of the calf. That's what happened. And he didn't. So that fulfilled the blood sacrifice of the Day of Atonement, but he did not die on the Day of Atonement.
So are there more allusions like that where we're going to be able to see the fullness of his entire, because all the books can't be written to contain the life of Messiah. Is there going to be a way, do you think, I know you don't like that idea about supposing something, but I mean, are we going to be able to understand more when we're in our glorified body and we're in his presence? It won't be like, stumping the fruit, because we're never going to do that to Messiah, but will we possibly understand more? Because Paul says that we only understand now in part.
Well, I would hope that you'll understand more when you get to that point.
Thank you.
And you're going to be learning from the Messiah himself.
Right.
So, if you ask me to speculate, I don't do that.
I know you do. Sorry.
Question?
I just had a comment on something you said that might have confused people. You were talking about First Thessalonians 5:1, where in Greek it says "peride," which should probably be translated "but concerning." And I'm looking at King James, New American Standard, New English, and none of them translated that.
Well, the old ASV says "but concerning."
Well, I checked Greek too, and you're right. You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. But most of our translators didn't agree with us. So I just wanted everybody to know that just because the translation you might.
What does the new ASV say?
Not telling you.
That you're right, they're wrong.
No. What is the actual translation in the New
Well,
American
okay,
Standard?
King James says, "But of the times and the seasons, brethren."
Okay.
Okay, New American Standard says, "Now as to the times and the epochs."
Yeah.
New English says, "Now as to the periods and times."
You should see how they translate "peride" in 1 Corinthians, because that appears a number of times in one epistle.
Right.
It's all "peride." The best translation is what I see in the ASV, which is what my Bible here is.
You and I read Greek, and
Yeah.
most other folks don't.
The two words, like I know 1 Corinthians and the ASV, but concerning, it's always but concerning, as the Greek says "peride."
Well, I understand that. I just didn't want everybody else to be confused.
Well, I'm glad you cleared it up.
And now we are.
We don't read those.
We'll talk about it later.
But concerning is the best rendering. "Peride."
I agree.
And therefore, go with the ASV if you need English. Okay, question?
So on one of the PowerPoints this morning, there was a line that was talking about Acts 2, and on the PowerPoint it said Acts 5. So it's a mental note.
I did do the PowerPoint. I don't know how to do a PowerPoint. This is done, it's probably done by my secretary, is very good at it. But "peride" in 1 Thessalonians is in chapter 5, verse 1. Did it say something else in the PowerPoint?
No, this is this morning, and it talked about Acts 2,
Okay.
but it said 5.
Okay, question? Any other questions? Any last questions? All right, okay.
Have you delivered this same message to International Church in Honolulu
I have.
4 decades ago?
It's been a long time ago, I can't even tell you how long ago, but yes, I did teach this at the National Baptist Church, which also had a school there at that time. The school did not survive until now, but I did teach at that school every year almost.
Were you there? Were you there?
Pardon?
I'm sorry,
Were you there?
I used to live in Hawaii.
You.
Me.
Is that David's
Not another.
church?
Oh, no, Hawaii is unique because whenever they say surf's up, I lost half my students.
Is that the church of your friends in Hawaii?
Yeah, what about them?
Is that the same church? I
No,
think
it's not the same
Daniel
church.
or David?
No,
Oh,
but their church, their congregation was founded in